Hey, what's good, y'all? It's Lucky Luch here. Welcome back to my room and my YouTube channel. Today we're gonna do another media talk. Yeah. Ooh, man. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with my media talks, it's an ongoing thing on this channel where I talk about media that I've consumed over the past few weeks. So for music, this can be a single, an album, or a concert. There's a lot of movie reviews that I do for these media talks, but this can also be other forms of art, such as a museum, an installation, things like that. So without further ado, one thing I forgot to mention is my rating system that I made up a couple of videos ago. So that's going to pop up right here, and now we can get into it. I feel like this year has been kind of a big year for thriller as a subgenre. And maybe that's like a bad take because I've only been getting into films over the past few years. But this is the first time I've seen thriller used as a subgenre for like almost every movie that's coming out. Horror, mystery, thriller. Thriller, mystery, horror. Action, thriller, comedy, thriller. But these three movies that I'm going to talk about today are all putting the thrills first. Hey, that's a tagline. But I feel like they're all like thriller movies first, and then underneath that is like action or crime or something along those measures. All right, so first up, we got Relay. This is directed by David Mackenzie, who's famous for Hell or High Water. I'll leave a couple more of his movies over here. This stars Riz Ahmed. It's part of one of my favorite movies ever, Sound of Metal. I think about the ending of that movie every day. Lily James, shout out to her. She's in the love interest in Baby Driver. I loved her character in Iron Claw. Sam Worthington, little Avatar in the house, hell yeah. And Willa Fitzgerald, who, if you're unfamiliar with her game, first of all, I think she's so pretty. Second of all, she's in either the first or second season of Reacher. I believe it's the first, though. I'll double check that and add a note in the video somewhere. This is about a fixer played by Riz Ahmed, and he uses like a relay telephone service to communicate with his clients. And his identity is kept secret until everything goes wrong. I know I'm in a very silly mood today, but honestly, the first two acts of this movie are very good. It's sleek, it's smart, it's intense. It takes place throughout New York, so it's using New York as a background character, which I thought was really freaking cool. There's an airport scene in this movie that's like really, really well done, and this reminds me of like 70s spy thrillers where they're kind of using the technology given at the time to play like a cat and mouse game. Both the good guys and the bad guys in this movie are good at their job, so they're doing little tricks and playing little games in here to kind of like figure out like who's gonna do what. And for the first half of this movie's almost 2 hours, so I'm gonna say the first hour of this movie, I was locked in. I don't want to say I was at the edge of my seat, but I was definitely leaning in, being like, oh, is one of these people gonna be found out? Is something gonna happen to one of these people? Ooh, that's a cool move. Ooh, that was a bad move. Ooh, that was a good counter move. Like, I was really into this. And then there's a couple twists that happen in the third act and some very, very basic action scenes, and it took me out of the movie. Like, I want to say this movie was very good, but I don't think that's the case here. I would be lying and being dishonest if I said that. Now, this has a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critic score, 89% from the audience score. So let's round this up. 80% and 90%. I don't think that at all. After those twists come in, this went from very good to okay for me. That's how much the twists turned me off. And I was in the theater. I was supposed to see those twists and be like, whoa! And I was like, no. I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling it. Yeah, this movie gets an okay from me. Next one. Caught Stealing, directed by Darren Aronofsky. First off, I did not know he was from Brooklyn. Shout out to Brooklyn. Of course, this movie takes place in New York. You already know I got the hat on. I live in the Bronx. I grew up in Mayapack. I was also born in the Bronx. So I breathe New York State. I love it when movies use the city or the state as a character. Relay did a decent job of that. And of course, Caught Stealing does a really good job of that as well. So this stars Austin Butler, Regina King, love you, Zoe Kravitz, Matt Smith, awesome actor. And what I like about this movie the most is that it reminds me of like some of the better Guy Ritchie movies mixed with the mid to like upper tier Martin Scorsese movies, and they had a love child and they made this movie. Because similar to those, their style of movies, this cast just gets better. Right, so I got up to Matt Smith, Liv Schreiber. I met him in person a few times. Cool dude. Vincent D'Onofrio. And then we got Bad Bunny. Like this cast is so deep. A lot of them are just playing like really cool characters. And what I like about this movie the most is that it's like our protagonist is just always in the wrong place at the wrong time. You think there's one problem, and then there's somebody else involved. And then there's like another problem and another problem. And our protagonist has to go through like each level to just get their life back, right? Because like that's how much in the dumps they get. Austin Butler plays this former baseball player. He's like one bad day from being in the tank, or he's one good day from not being in the shitter. Former baseball player, and he's a bartender in New York. And this takes place in 1998, which is very, very important because there's no smartphones. This is pre 9/11, pre like mass gentrification. I think that's a really important note about this movie, and it makes the world inside of Caught Stealing believable. It makes everything make sense. So I really found this movie entertaining. It was a good watch in the theater, like a nice full theater. Everybody was really into it. I really had a fun time watching this one. It was really fast paced. Once everything starts, it doesn't really slow down. Austin Butler does a really solid job. I love seeing Zoe Kravitz in this movie. I feel like she brings an extra little like spice and swag everywhere she goes. So yeah, I give Caught Stealing a very good. Next up, we have Black Bag. Controversially, I think this is the best movie out of the three that I'm talking about in this video. We'll get to that in a second. But let's start off with the director and cast. This is directed by Steven Soderbergh, famous for Ocean's 11. He has a few other bangers. I'll leave him over here. This stars Cate Blanchett. Love you, girl. Michael Fassbender, amazing actor. Marissa Abella, Tom Burke, Naomi Harris, who I think she's good in everything. Loved her in 28 Days Later. She's a badass. And Regé-Jean Page, who I know famous from Bridgerton, and the OG himself, Pierce Brosnan. So our main characters here are Michael Fassbender. His character's name is George. Cate Blanchett, she's Catherine, and they're married. So George gets word from one of his bosses that somebody has betrayed the company. They work for an intelligence agency, and somebody has committed a foul act of treason. They don't know who, and George has 1 week to find out who did this. Now, if that wasn't pressing enough, one of the suspects is his wife. And all the other characters in this movie are suspects, and they all have close personal relationships with George. So right there, I think this plot is so juicy, and you find this out right at the beginning. And the fact that it takes place over a week, definitely raises the stakes of what happens in Black Bag. Now, what's different from the other thrillers that I talked about today is that, they take place in big cities, and there's a lot of like running around and fast-paced stuff that happens. In Black Bag, it's not like that. It's very sophisticated. It's very elegant, dressed up, almost seductive in a way. And George, he can kill you with his hands, but he's going to use his mind first. And he uses mind games and conversation to find out who did what and who is where. Really, really, really cool movie. And I think where this gets some flack is that it doesn't have action. It doesn't have people running around and gunshots and, fight scenes or whatever. This doesn't do any of that. This is strictly just espionage and strategy and words and, body language, things like that. And I think that's why this movie is so good. You see these characters like play these games with each other, but it's a lot of verbal chess that happens. And I find it super interesting. And I thought this movie was super interesting. Now, when I go on the Rotten Tomatoes for this, the critic score 96, audience score 70s, so there's a big difference. Like I said before, this movie gets a lot of flack for not having a lot of action. Once again, I think it's seductive using language and strategy and mind games to really get its point across. I like this one the best out of the three, and I'm going to give this a very good as well. So that's it for the movies. This is technically a musical, but I saw it in the theater, and that's Hamilton. They recently put the new cast together to do like a 10-year anniversary of Hamilton. It's crazy, it's been 10 years since Hamilton's been out. They recorded it and they released it to theater. So I went to AMC to go see it. And yeah, I totally see why this was such a phenomenon. I'm kind of mad at myself for not watching this earlier. This was so good. Rap battles between like Congress members. The first hour flew by before intermission. And then intermission happens and there was like a little like hourglass with like a little timer that like counted down from 10 minutes. So you had intermission in the theater. I was the only one in the theater, which low key, I felt like a loser for a second, but I didn't care. I had Hamilton to myself, which I deserve that. Editing Luch here. I realize like I'm missing so much in this section of the video just because I don't know how to describe it. Like I've kind of mentioned here and there, I'm not much of a theater musical person, but whenever I do check it, it's usually when I hear something's great, just like Hamilton was. The way that they had sped up and slowed down syllables in order to fit the raps is really impressive because they're doing it over 3 hours worth of songs. The fact that I think it's like the motifs or the themes of some of these songs kept on coming back when Hamilton is going through something and he says, but I'm not going to give away my shot. And it goes back into the song is really cool. The theme between him and George Washington, how he needs his like right-hand man, I believe that song is called. Things like that just really made this a fun watch. And it brings you through everything, you know, his life, his death, his family dynamics, and how his legacy lived long after he died. And this also hit a good place too for me. I lived in Harlem for a very long time, and I lived in, of course, Hamilton Heights, where you can go check out his house. And also just looking at the cast and being like, wow, so many of these people became like mid to high level superstars, or I've seen some of them on TV shows. I've seen some of them in movies or in other plays. Like that's so cool. That's so cool. Lin-Manuel Miranda, I think he's a true visionary. I think he's awesome, and he's Boricua representing. So yeah, I definitely appreciated watching this. This was incredible. I'm gonna give this a great. I don't have too much to say. I'm sure a lot of y'all have seen Hamilton or heard about it. If you have it playing in the theater, go and see it. I know it's playing on Disney Plus, but I'm sure it's not the same. Seeing it in like a big theater with some popcorn and, you know, a drink, I thought this was great for sure. So before I leave, I want to talk about Turnstile. Yeah, I know, a little bit of a curveball here, but I first started listening to them in 2021 when the Glow On album came out. It was really popular. Kind of another curveball was them dropping this album. Now, I didn't know much about them at the time. I'm just like, hey, this album cover looks really cool. It was like a bunch of clouds up in the sky. It was pink. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Then I started listening to the album and I'm like, whoa, this is great. Now, I don't listen to too much like punk and hardcore. I'm very selective with it. There's only like a few bands that I like. And so the fact that I was able to listen to this and really enjoy it was a big deal for me. And then I talked to one of my close friends about it, and they're like, oh yeah, it was actually a little bit controversial that they dropped Glow On because previous to that, their music was a lot more heavier. Their music was definitely like leaning more towards hardcore than it was punk, and this album had more pop stuff on it. I was at my tattoo appointment back in June, and I believe Never Enough came out that very same night. I might be off. Yeah, June 6th. Never Enough came out that same night, and she was going to like their first show in NYC to help promote the album. And as I was getting the tattoo done, of course, listen to Glow On. I listened to a few songs on here, and I really liked Never Enough. Some people will argue that it was a continuation of Glow On or felt like Glow On Part 2. I definitely see that, but I don't know. The first listen to this album, like, this album's gonna run my summer, and it really has. Sun Shower is one of my favorite songs on here. Seeing Stars is pretty incredible, and I know they made that song with Hayley Williams. She did a cover of it at one of her solo concerts, or it might have been a Paramore concert, but either way, awesome. I Care is my ish. That is my song of the summer. It has a super uppity feel, even though the themes about it are a little bit darker. But yeah, I think it's an awesome song. It also like makes you kind of want to hit like one of these, like, you know what I'm saying? It has a super 80s vibe. But the reason why I bring them up today is not because this album was definitely part of my summer, but they recently did a Tiny Desk concert. And at about 14 minutes in, they have a mosh pit and a stage dive, which has never been done before. At least I've never seen it on a Tiny Desk concert. Like, it was so cool. It was so them. It didn't like feel out of place. I felt like it was coming eventually. Also, they had a saxophone player and a trumpet player added to their set, and it added such a nice dynamic. I can't think of which song right now has a trumpet player. When I get the feeling it's in. Hold on. Dreaming. Yes, it was Dreaming. Dreaming had a trumpet solo in it, and then they continued playing with the saxophone player, the trumpet player, and it added a totally different dynamic. Honestly, it made some of these songs more emotional than they already were. I realized I had written some notes. Yeah, so added keys and trumpets were peak. The transition to Never Enough was awesome. It felt super emotional. And then there was like a piano solo that led to both the trumpet player and the saxophonist going into like a jazz kind of freestyle. And then there was a mosh pit and the stage dive. If y'all haven't checked it out or haven't heard about it, definitely recommend the Tiny Desk concert. And then if you like or don't like that, then definitely check out the music. But I just thought it was worth talking about. It was a really cool experience. And then for like a little 15-minute video on like a weekend, it really was a fun watch. Yeah, shout out to Turnstile. I think they're so good. You know, maybe next time when they're on the East Coast, I'll try to see them. I goofed by missing their New York show. All right, y'all. That's today's Media Talk. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. I try to upload every Tuesday. I talk about movies and music, cool stuff. I make music myself. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.